Oh, we'll just go again there. Hello and welcome to the Hurling Show. Myself, Shane Stapleton. Joining me as ever is Michael Verney, just hopping in there looking like D'Artagnan once again. How's things, Michael?
You're not great in the sound this morning, Shane. You weren't up and at it ready early this morning. You didn't get to have the breathing right, but we're ready to go now.
We're about to fly through. Jeez, it was another big weekend of hurling. So much to make your mind blur, the amount that was going on there. Just quickly recap on the results for anyone who hasn't seen them yet. Limerick, they had a hefty enough win over West Mead for a finish, 326 to 18 points. Galway beat Cork, big turnaround there. Waterford against Tipperary, very impressive that second half especially. Clare saw off Kilkenny, Antrim beat Laois and Wexford beat Dublin. We'll go down through all the other tiers as well. But plenty to get through from the weekend. You were at the Waterford-Tipperary game, and obviously we'll go through that in big detail. But what would be the story of the weekend from you?
Oh, probably it's not a positive thing, but some of the injuries that were just picked up along the way, particularly from a Waterford perspective. They're playing Clare in 2 weeks, and they're going to be under a bit of pressure with Conor Prunty, maybe Ozzie Gleeson, and Shane Fives, I'd say, is definitely out. So that would definitely be one of the stories, just the proximity of league to championship and the difficulties that poses for managers. But I thought that game down in Waterford was highly entertaining, some unbelievable goals in it. And I think, fair enough, there's been talk about high scoring games and there's been talk about, freeze and advantage rule. I think things have really leveled off. I think the quality of hurling over the weekend at different times was really good. The game I was at had lots of nearly too much entertainment at times when you're trying to work at it and trying to keep everything on track. I think the advantage rule has leveled itself off. I think I don't know whether there's been a talk behind the scenes with referees, but a lot of the time the hand is going up and they're just letting them off, which is great, because there was a couple of scores got yesterday by both Waterford and Tip where it would have just been a free. And the
Jack Prendergast had one in particular, didn't he?
Yeah, that was a beauty. He was brilliant yesterday. Was going back through my team ratings there just after the match, and you're looking at like 4 of the Waterford attack getting 9 nines, or was it 3 9s and 1 8? That's just the kind of attacking threat that they gave yesterday. But just as I say, I suppose the pessimism is being replaced by optimism again, I think, going into the championship, and I think we could have a brilliant championship.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder, we're brought to you by OurGameRetro.com. If you want to get this class Wexford jersey, the Galway one that Michael Verney is on, go to OurGameRetro.com, put in the promo code OurGame, and you get 15% off. A massive thing that kind of, I'd say, rocked everyone over the weekend, and obviously it's a GA show, but what happened with Christian Erickson when he was playing for Denmark against Finland in the Euro 2020, game stopped up, obviously his cardiac arrest, and the doctor, I believe he said that he was gone. But very chilling scenes, and it actually reminded me of, this talk about having defibrillators at all GA grounds, and I think the value of it was seen right there. Even the Dublin statsman, the hurling statsman, formerly football statsman, Shane Carney, October 2010, he had a case of sudden adult death syndrome. I did an article with him about this before. He was just playing five-a-side in Plunkett's in the north side of Dublin. Like, in his own words, I dropped dead on the floor, and a defibrillator, some quick thinking, and the chance presence of a fireman, Terry O'Brien, helped save his life. So he doesn't really remember that day. But it was chilling stuff to watch, and even you'd have to frown at what the TV directors did, zooming in on the situation, his wife and stuff like that. But tough to watch, no matter what background that you're brought up in.
Oh, that was really hard to watch. Yeah, I actually wasn't watching at the time, and then quickly messages started filtering through on WhatsApp, and it's just like, "Are you watching this?" And just kind of turned on the TV then and was able to see it, and was listening to bits on the radio nearly at the same time as well. Yeah, it's very hard to get your head around, and in those situations, because with Muamba a couple of years ago and different things that have happened, you're probably thinking of the worst. But isn't it great that obviously Erickson lives to tell the tale, and everybody got a massive shock, and it looked like the whole Euros was going to have this massive cloud hanging over. But it's just great that, as I say, that he lives to tell the tale. But there's been a couple of instances GAA wise, as you say. I remember chatting to Brian Regan that played a bit of hurling with London from Galway originally. He dropped in a a game for I think Gabriel's were playing. I think it was Robert Emmett's a couple of years ago, and he dropped during the game, and he was actually out for 6 to 7 minutes. And it was quick thinking nurses and defibrillator and people getting in and giving him CPR that saved him. And he now actually has a little matchbox in his chest, basically a defibrillator that will kick in if that ever happens to him again, that his heart stops or something like that again. But just really, really frightening moments. Yeah, like nothing like anything that goes on between the white lines. None of that matters really when you see something like that happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that was Christian Erickson, and best of luck to him in the future. We'll jump back into the hurling, obviously, and you kind of mentioned some of the injuries there, the kind of the dying down of the disadvantage rule, as we like to call it. That is good, definitely good. It certainly isn't annoying us as much, and as much like I still have an issue of seeing these 100-yard frees happening in pretty much every game. That is something that, that may be changed, seeing as there's an advisory group now looking at the sliotar that's been headed up by Ned Quinn of Kilkenny. But the games are settling down, but the injuries is definitely something I think there's going to be a price to be paid for certain teams coming into the championship now, because they've had to play so many games after such a long layoff. Even just a couple of others that stood out to me. David Mcinerney made his comeback for Clare on Saturday, and he was pointed at his kind of groin leg area when he had to come off towards I think it was the tail end of the first half. He had started quite well, and he's such a big player for them. Mark Schutte came off early for Dublin against Wexford. Aaron Fitzgerald also came off for Clare against Kilkenny, and there's been plenty of that. Some players have already been through injuries and came back, like Robbie O'Flynn did for Cork. So, yeah, certain teams are definitely going to be paying the price going into the summer. We'll jump straight onto the Galway and Cork game now. So Galway 325, Cork 223. Kieran Kingston, when eventually the players or the media caught up with him afterwards, he was saying that he felt the team lost their shape, that Galway overran them, that the team did dig in and react, and they did when they were capitulating, but they just eventually it was a disappointing finish as far as he's concerned. Fellas ran out of juice, some coming back from injury, lost their kind of shape. Now this is a team that was up 2-12 to 12 points at half time, and they were looking pretty good. Jack O'Connor was on fire up front. Patrick Horgan was looking good in at full forward, obviously close to the square as he tends to operate. But to collapse the way they did, I mean, Galway just completely took over. And this is without Joe Canning too. A great side for Galway, but would you be very worried now as a Cork person when you watch the collapse in the second half here and the collapse the first day against Limerick? And in both situations, this is when the game was decided. Like that there were such decisive periods where they fell apart.
Yeah, no, you definitely would have to be a bit worried. Just some of the Galway scores, particularly in that second half, there was no hands-on a lot of the time. It was like the Cork of maybe last year where they were afforded loads of space. It definitely wasn't like, maybe the Cork we saw against Tip at different stages where they were kind of swarming all over them and getting loads of bodies in. A neat little sidestep was able to get a guy into space like Mannion kind of half walked through for his goal, that all-important goal in the second half. And they just had far too much time on the ball, and you just can't afford Galway that sort of time on the ball. So it's definitely worrying. Cork have mixed the good with the bad. It's kind of hard to know how you'd kind of rate their league campaign. Probably something around maybe like a C+ or C- or something like that. Just because when they've been good, they've been really good, and they've threatened the goal an awful lot, particularly against Waterford and a bit against Tip. But when they've switched off, it's been the old Cork. And again, I've said it before, but like Ben O'Connor said, he used to always say that about Galway, that you didn't know what you were going to get out of them, and he then admitted that now you don't know what you're going to get out of us. And you can get this brilliance and you can get themselves into a winning position, and then all of a sudden, it's a 12-point turnaround and it's a 5-point defeat at the end. So definitely some bright points for Galway, or for Cork, I should say, but some of the same old failings as well.
Yeah, when you look at Galway winning without Joe Canning as well and playing this well, considering how instrumental he was in the game a week earlier against Waterford, where again Galway came from behind and just completely took over the game. I wonder, is this something that points to their athletic prowess? Is it something that just points to their quality, even their bench? I mean, just go through some of the names that came on for them in this game. David Burke came on after 47 minutes, looked really good. Jason Flynn came in, Niall Burke, two guys who are 6 foot plus. in and out of the team over the last few years. Sean Lennon, Jarlath Mannion as well. Good impacts in off the bench. One thing I'd wonder about Galway is, have they settled on the 3 and 6? Daithí Burke was named at full back, but he played at centre back, and Grode McInerney was wearing 6, but he went back and minded the square. I thought Grode McInerney struggled at times on Patrick Horgan when he was full back. I thought Daithí Burke, and like Jack Prendergast was scored 1-2 off him. Now maybe Prendergast wasn't always on him the week beforehand, so there are probably scores to be got there. But as a centre back, when you're holding your position, that's there's always that price to pay, that you do have to hold a position and at times accept that your man's going to get a few scores. And none of your teammates are going to freak out because everyone knows that that's the plan. You have to try and pass him off as much as you can. But Daithí's use to the ball, I thought, was very good. Like when he came out, and maybe this is something that we've talked about before, the players who play an awful lot of football, they don't tend to just blast up the field. They're looking to see how can we get this into a very favourable position. And a few times he just played lovely balls that were bouncing maybe 10 yards in front of the inside forward. That beautiful ball that you've actually time to watch it bounce and then just land on your hurley. Whereas, if you hit a ball and it bounces right at your toes and there's a defender up your backside, it's very, very hard to do a lot with it. But then he moved back to full back, and I felt that Galway were a little more solid back there. So I think this is probably the biggest conundrum from Shane O'Neill. He has a headache in the forward line because he has a ridiculous amount of good options, and Joe Canning to come back into a team that scored 325. But at the back, he's probably still going to have to rejig a few things. And even Darren Morrissey came off. One of those things where he went into a tackle and then he kept going, and then all of a sudden he just kind of went down with his back. So I don't know if it was a spasm or something like that. But he'd want him back in because he's had a pretty good league. So different types of headaches at either side of the field.
Yeah, it's mad to think that he's the whole way through the league now and he's not 100% sure. He knows who's going to be 3 and 6. He just doesn't know what way they're going to alternate, really.
Well, I don't even know. I started to wonder when you see Grode McInerney being taken off late on, the 63rd minute. Is he minding him, or is he thinking, right, maybe he's not going to be in my starting team now? And I'd love if Galway fans get onto us there and let us know, what do you think, or even people who don't support Galway, do you think that that McInerney and, well, obviously Daithí Burke's going to start, but are they going to stick with that? Because you're not really going to take Fintan Burke and Pádraig Mannion out of the half back line. You could potentially put Fintan Burke full back, but he hasn't done it. So I'm just wondering, is Grode McInerney going to be the odd man out here at some point?
I don't see him losing out. I think he just had a bit of a bad day yesterday. Even for the sharp puck out, Ger Canning called it a wretched sharp puck out. It was straight to his hand, and McInerney just dropped it. But the keeper always nearly gets blamed for these things if they don't come off. It was the same last year at different stages. I'd say McInerney probably just didn't have his finest hour. I think what you're saying there with Daithí Burke is so true. I think what he offers them going forward is massive. We know what he can do as a defender, but what he offers them going forward, it just means that they're on the front foot. The forwards are nearly always going to be getting good ball. We even saw he's unbelievably selfless too. He soloed through there near the end and was on the 30-yard line and around 30 yards out and could have put the ball over the bar.
But that was silly.
Well, it was a bit silly, but he's trying to work it to Brian Kincannon. He's also maybe there might be a small bit, I'm afraid, that he's going to miss or whatever, but he does offer them an awful lot attacking wise, but again, they'd probably love him 3 and 6. But I'd imagine, do you know what? It's very hard to actually nail your colours to the mast and say he's going to be 3 and he's going to be 6, because you couldn't have any degree of certainty. They might just go back to the default of Daithí Burke at 3 and Grode McInerney at 6. I find it very, very hard to nail my colours to the mast either way. But the fact that they stuck with it maybe a bit more in the last couple of games and had Burke at centre back predominantly, maybe he's the more likely one to be 6.
Cork, as the game went on, just struggled to create chances. As Galway took over, I'm just looking at it here and I sort of have a bit of my own map of the match. But in the second half, they created just 7 chances in the third quarter, which is
and
pretty
that's
low.
six in the first quarter last week, Shane, as well. Remember the 6 in the first quarter against Limerick last week. So that's so low compared to yesterday. Waterford would say we're creating, probably about 15 chances a quarter at least.
Yeah, I actually will be able to check that because I have that down all right. But and it's not far off it overall because Waterford created 52 chances against Tipperary, and that's not to be sneezed at. Just create 37 chances created for Cork in this game. Now everyone has different ways of tabulating scoring chances. I would include a shot that drops short. I always count that as a scoring attempt. If a ball is overrun in the corner, and let's say you're the corner back and I tackle you and I knock it out over the end line and it's a wide, and you can't really count that as a chance as far as I'm concerned. But Cork had just 37 chances to Galway's 50. Like, Galway could have ran up an even bigger scoreline here. So as I said, just like 16 chances overall in the second half. Sure, Galway had that in the fourth quarter of the game alone. And like as I said, they've got that seasoned bench. They've a real kind of knack for turnarounds. They did this without Joe Canning, who had some sort of when the TV producer zoomed in on him at some stage, he seemed to have some support around his hand or wrist or hand area. I'm not sure if he was asked, if Shane O'Neill was asked about it afterwards, but they obviously want him back as quickly as possible. But is there a bit of hassle in the castle for Cork? I mean, there's talk that initially Kieran Kingston, this was reported in the Indo, maybe in other papers too, that initially Kieran Kingston was not available to the media, that he had a pressing meeting upstairs at Páirc Uí Chaoimh. He did come down and talk to the media eventually, but that's a little bit unusual.
Reminds me of a time I went to the Blue Stars match on New Year's Day in Parnell Park, and the Dubs were off on holiday the next day. Jim Gavin was involved with one of the teams, it was the Blue Stars against Dublin or whatever it was, and Gavin disappeared after into the dressing rooms or changing areas in Donacarney, and we were waiting for about an hour and a half, myself and Paul Keane and a few more journalists, and I don't know whether they escaped out the back door or the side door, but Jim Gavin never reappeared, nor did anyone to talk about the Dubs or anything like that. And we've been waiting. You're there, when you're there just solely to talk to one of those kind of big names and get a reaction from them, but they all disappeared out the side door. I think it was Mossy Quinn was playing for the Blue Stars and got out of a bit of trouble. But obviously, I think he said they're like 20 days away from championship, Cork are. So you are trying to, cross your T's and dot your I's. There's an awful lot to get sorted in that time. So they obviously had a meeting kind of around, probably looking towards championship, but obviously looking towards the collapse as well. And, having, offered very little in the first quarter against Limerick, and even in the second quarter against Limerick, they didn't offer anything much in the second half against Galway yesterday. So there's definitely pressing questions for them there. I don't know if there's hassle in the castle, but it's definitely finished on a negative note. The league has definitely finished on a negative note after lots of bright spots, in the first game and even in the third game as well against Tip.
Yeah, because you come away from the league having started quite well, thinking, okay, well, maybe Cork haven't changed from last year. Like, it still feels like they're trying to persist with the change in game plan, which is work the ball out the field. Trucking it long isn't going to work for Cork. I don't think anyone believes that. That's something we've talked about an awful lot. But I still, I don't rule them out beating anybody. So this is the same as last week. I think Cork can beat anybody on their day.
But can't win the All-Ireland this year.
They probably can't win 4. You could make a case that winning 4 games and going through the front door, where you're guaranteed 4 very difficult games, in their case, Limerick, then Cork, then Clare, Waterford, Tipperary, All-Ireland semi-final against a big team, All-Ireland final against a big team. Can't see that happening. But if they got knocked out in Munster and got up a bit of momentum going through the back door, I don't know, would that be perversely a weird sort of a way? Might that even work to their favour? Because, every time if you have a big championship defeat, it forces you to be really, really honest about the things that aren't working. Like, sometimes you can get through a game or two, win by a point, and you're like, things aren't too bad, lose by a point, and you're like, well, we need to really analyse why we're not quite getting there.
Yeah, you can kind of paper over the cracks with a 1 or 2 point win, where sometimes if you're beaten by 7 or 8, it forces you to make almost like seismic changes. Like when Cork were beaten by Tip 2 years ago, and then all of a sudden Mark Ellis is called down from the terraces and they rearrange their team and deliver this brilliant performance against Limerick. But yeah, I can't see them going through the front door winning 4 games in a row to win an All-Ireland. Now, they could easily win a game, lose a game, and then go on a bit of a run. But I'm still not sure. I think it's going to take a bit more time with Cork. From a Galway point of view, then I was just kind of looking at yesterday's game. Like, the previous couple of weeks I've been talking about Brian Kincannon and how influential he is, and he's like fast becoming like one of their most important players. But then you're talking about like other important players or other game changers. It was Colin Mannion yesterday who pulled all the strings, and he can do that on a given day. And we probably shouldn't forget that he was off the pitch, you know, after 25 minutes last year, the All-Ireland semi-final, as was Joe Canning, another game changer that they have. Then you throw Conor Whelan into the mix as well, and Brian Kincannon, and you're thinking, like, does any team have more game changers than Galway have? Do you know the classic case of, you know, we have these three really good forwards. If two of them spark on a given day, we're going to be hard beaten. When Galway have like probably 4 game-changing forwards, we'd say, maybe Canning might be out middle of the field. You know, if 2 of them spark on a given day, how hard beaten are they going to be? And I'm actually not sure if any other team has as many game changers, particularly from 8 up. As I don't know if anyone has more than Galway, to be honest.
And they're very good without the ball too. I mean, probably Kincannon isn't probably talked about too much that, but he's very good without the ball. Conor Whelan's brilliant without the ball. Joe Canning's very hard tackling when he doesn't have the ball. So that's the benefit going in the other direction also. I'm sure Limerick would have plenty to say about having, you know, real game-winning forwards. Gillan, Hegarty, Tom Morrissey, Keane Lynch when he's up there. Graham Mulcahy, who you and I both felt should have been in line for Hurler of the Year in 2018, or very, very close to it. Like, they're not doing so bad either. Cork have 1 or 2, but they haven't obviously got anywhere near as many as Limerick, certainly not on the evidence of what we've seen in the last few years. But let's analyse what are Cork trying to do. So they're obviously trying to work the ball out from the back. Teams will probably try and allow them to have the ball to some degree, very close to their own goal. But then what are they trying to do to work it out? Actually, do you know, the player who's probably been criticised the most for his hurling is Damien Catalan. We know that before. He seems like a fairly resilient sort of character and drives through it anyway, continues to fight so hard and gets his place. And then when he's out on the field, you do notice him. Like, he's always making himself available for the ball, which is something that impresses me about him. And he turns, he gets it, he does a 1-2 with hand passes or stick passes, whatever, stays going, overlaps, and is even going up. You know, you mentioned Dahi Burke going up to the far 21. Damien Catalan gets himself up the pitch. But the problem is, while he's showing for the ball, and I don't know if teams are allowing him to get the ball, but like at times it breaks down, but it breaks down for other players as well. And at least he is showing for it in a way that other lads probably aren't as much. And then like Mark Coleman was all right, but you saw he was pretty good. His hurling is delightful. But Conor Whelan is able to burst past him for that goal, catch a high one over him. So that therein lies a potential weakness that you and I would probably have talked about before, where like he's got all that silk, but if it kind of is trucked down on top of him against a very dangerous lad, how's it going to go the other way?
Teams will go after that, Shane. Yeah, like 100%. No more than Waterford went after in the All-Ireland semi-final in 2017 when they put Bricky and wing forward and put ball on top of him. So, like, teams will realise Galway or Cork are brilliant on the ball, and Coleman will orchestrate from centre back. So how are we going to make him feel uncomfortable? We'll put this big bull like Whelan in on top of him and make it be, you know, a one-on-one battle between the two of those. So I think teams, you know, that's what they will see as some of Cork's perceived weakness, maybe even a lack of physicality. Like if you're putting teams physically up against each other, you definitely would say, you know, of the teams contesting for the All-Ireland, that Cork would definitely not be one of the most physical teams. Definitely not up there with a Limerick or a Galway or probably even a Kilkenny. Yeah,
and even their players who are 6 foot plus probably aren't going to always be looking for contact or putting massive hits on him. Like Tim O'Mahony's brilliant with the ball. Would like to see him, you know, physically start to impose himself on games, because you know he can hurl, and sometimes he blasts the ball up the field and you're thinking maybe you could take a man on here and put him on the floor while you're at it, because his potential is huge. Dara Fitzgibbon, a couple of great scores as well. Sometimes, and I know he's probably a slight lean player, you know, butcher's dog, but maybe could he kind of put himself around a little bit more when they don't have the ball. I think Conor Cahalane has had a good start to life in the forward line for Galway, for Cork, got himself a nice goal against Galway. Seamus Harnedy quiet, Shane Barrett quiet, Shane Kingston okay at times, Horgan pretty good. Jack O'Connor I thought was very, very good in that first half, but obviously went quiet in the second half. So all in all, it does feel like Cork are to some degree the same old Cork. When
things are going wrong, Shane, do they have too many of the same type of player?
Yeah, and what did they do? Like, what was plan B once Galway took over? Well, you know, he obviously makes some substitutions. He brings in Robbie O'Flynn, Alan Cadigan, Alan Connolly, Billy Hennessy, Declan Dalton, Tyke Deise and Sean O'Leary Hayes. But it really didn't change anything. And, you know, they held on towards the end, and they were obviously forcing goal situations when they were, you know, 4 and 5 points down. And you kind of get that, and it probably makes the scoreline look a little bit kind of worse than it probably was. It's not like they were played out of it. It's just that there was a period there between the 57th minute and the 67th minute, and they'd only a couple of chances. And meanwhile, Galway scored 1-5 or 1-6. So the game's in the heel of the hunt. You're struggling for oxygen, and Galway are just taking over. And you're not really putting tackles in. Like, there was a couple of, like, if you look back at some of the scores, I think Niall Burke was able to turn inside a couple of people and then fire over the bar pretty much without being tackled. There was plenty of that, like Cathal Mannion getting in behind and burying one into the net. It just for a finish, it was quite disappointing from a Cork point of view. But just to run through, like, just the scores from Galway again, you've mentioned some of the main men. Evan Nyland, 4 frees, 2 65s, and 2 from play again. Like, he's stepping in, and, you know, Joe Canning isn't there. It's not like Nyland is a like-for-like replacement, but, you know, it's kind of easy to look at one free taker coming in for another and say, is he filling the void? But he's doing his own job. He's doing a different sort of job to Joe Canning, but he's contributing positively. Like Conor Cooney and Conor Whelan, they got 1-1 each. And it's a bit of a freak goal for Conor Cooney as well. Coleman had just got a touch, got a flick on him, and, you know, he ended up smacking the ball into the ground, and it bounced over Patrick Collins, who was falling
keeper
backwards.
had gone to the ground already, expecting it low or whatever, and then all of a sudden it bounces up over him.
Yeah. And then, you know, Joseph Cooney came in. He got 3 points. Sean Loftus, Davy Burke, Niall Burke, Jason Flynn, they got a point each. And Brian Kincannon, like you mentioned, also, he got himself 4 points. So very, very impressive for Galway. It'll be a potential Leinster. The league final will also double up as a Leinster final if they meet Kilkenny on July 17th in the Leinster final, assuming they both get there. But Galway face the winners of Antrim and Dublin in the semi-final in 3 weeks from now. And it's hard to say that there'll be anything except roaring hot favourites.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd say there's a very, very, very high percentage chance that the league final will end up in a double of the Leinster final. I'd be I'd be very surprised if it's anything but that, being honest with you.
Davey has fooled you with his bit of shadow boxing from a few weeks ago from that league game in Nolan Park.
He hasn't. I just haven't seen enough. From Wexford this year, to be honest with you. And Galway, Kilkenny, Leinster final, definitely.
Okay, we'll come back to Wexford a little bit later on, and Kilkenny too. We'll move on now to a match you were at yesterday down in Walsh Park. Watford 229, Tipperary 321. And Tipperary were actually looking all right in the first half. They were led by 2-13 to 2-12 at half time. But in the second half, Watford absolutely took over. I mean, the between the 36th minute and the 40-odd minute, they just took over. Tipperary could barely even get a scoring chance, never mind put together a run of scores. And just to touch on who did the scoring for Watford, Stephen Bennett scored 15, 4 of those from play, 2-2 for Deise Hutchinson, who at times gave Cathal Barrett a very tough time of it. Shane Bennett, Jack Fagan and Peter Hogan got 2 each. Billy Power, Michael Kiley, Kieran Kerwin, Kieran Bennett, Jack Prendergast and Caleb Lyons all got a point each. That's a lot of players pitching in with scores. For Tipperary, Jason Ford got 1-5, 1-1 of that from play. Nolan McGrath got 1-2. Seamus Callan 1-1. Ronan Maher 4 points, including a 65. Jake Morris 3. Brendan Maher and Seamus Kennedy, Breen Flynn, Willie Connors and John McGrath got a point each. But I'll just start off with you. You were there. What was it like? I mean, even seeing Liam Sheedy against Liam Cahill, did that manifest itself in any which way, or was it gentlemanly conduct on the sideline?
No, they were at least 60 yards away from each other nearly the whole time. Tipperary started really well. They were actually 6 up. They were 1-12 to 9 up. But Waterford had been threatening in the goal, threatening a couple of chances maybe that they butchered before that. And then all of a sudden, Jack Prendergast, who was outstanding the whole way through, soloed down through the middle, threw a hand pass out to Deise Hutchinson, who could be no more than a yard in from the end line, and he volleyed on a ball to the net. I just love there was another old school goal when the ball came over to Aaron Shanter in the Clare game as well, and he doubled on it as well. And Hutchinson then got a brilliant goal where he
Seamus Callan did the same. So Seamus Callan pulled on the ball,
yeah. So there's and like Shane Bennett got a drop puck goal a couple of weeks ago. Like, so there's definitely some old school kind of tactics and plays coming back. But Hutchinson then turned inside, got a brilliant goal. He actually top spinned the ball on his right hand side to the bottom corner. Noel McGrath got a soft goal just before half time But it looked like it was going to be nip and tuck in second half. Then Stephen Bennett just totally took over. It was in the same sort of form as he was in last year. Shane Bennett, who hit 2 points. And sometimes when you look at, the way he used to look at, scores, and be like, oh, he only got 2 points. He must have been that good. Shane Bennett was brilliant, now I have to say. And it was back to, the sort of form that we know he's capable of. It probably took a while to settle back in, and been over 18 months since he played county, but he was brilliant. And as I said, Stephen Bennett, Jack Prendergast, Shane Bennett and Deise Hutchison in attack just looked really, really dangerous. And in fairness, Liam Sheedy admitted as much after. He admitted that when Waterford ran at them, they just couldn't handle him. He said when they started to run at us, they came in waves and we couldn't really deal with it. They came off the shoulder, they worked the ball out, they got good ball inside, and we know the quality of player that they have. If they get good ball to them, it's very hard to defend when it's coming 60-40 or 70-30. And I felt that's the type of ball that was coming in, and that was the type of ball. That's
everything that Tipperary didn't do. I was pulling my hair out. Obviously, everyone knows I'm a Tipperary man and Tipperary supporter, but I was pulling my hair out because Waterford were doing everything that a modern hurling team does, which is bring the ball out, give it to the man on the shoulder, support runs, good runs inside, deliver the ball in front, rather than these get the ball, stick past one side, stick past another side, drive the ball long, don't do interplay, don't hit it to the favour of your own teammate. Oh, look, there's a 100-yard shot, sure, I'll take that on. I'll plant the feet and I'll knock it straight up the line, make it impossible for the inside forward. If it wasn't for the actual skill level of the Tipperary players, I mean, you could argue that holds back Tipperary sometimes, that because of the individual skill that the game plan isn't worked on as much, or, like Waterford know that maybe they don't have the skill level or as many players with the same skill level. And like Waterford fans, if you think I'm wrong on that, tell me. You could absolutely blast me. I have no issue with that at all. But because of the skill level of Tipperary players at times, I don't think as much work is put into interplay, because they're all kind of thinking, well, this lad will knock it over from here or whatever. And I think that holds Tipperary back at times. Whereas other teams, they really analyse what they're good at. They try and work on a game plan. They try and work on mismatches, that type of thing. And like Tipperary probably lost this game just on the back of how they used the ball or refused to use it. I mean, Ronan Maher's an unbelievable player, but when I keep seeing him driving the ball in from 100 yards, like he got 3 from play, that's fine. But what else could Tipperary get if he wasn't driving the ball wide 3 or 4 times, or he was pinning it into... I want the ball in Seamus Callanan's hand, 30 yards from goal, rather than like a half back 100 yards from goal.
Yeah, yesterday was kind of like, resembled kind of like 2018 when Catalan just spent a lot of time, contesting ball with his man, that there was no need to be contesting if the ball going in was better, and he's picking up the ball. Paulie Matter hit him in a ball at one stage, and I think it ended up going out over the sideline. We talked about this before, about Seamus Callanan picking up the ball in positions that are not advantageous to him, like
out in the corner flag, like
essentially, yeah. Whereas the ball coming into the Waterford forward line was just like there was literally nothing Cottle Barrett could do with Deise Hutchison. The ball was bouncing in, as you mentioned earlier, that ball was bouncing 5 yards in front of him. It's, when the ball is coming in and you actually, as a forward, you don't think too far ahead, but you have the ball in your hand, barring a major mishap, and you're staring the defender almost in the eyes and you're in total control. Whereas the ball going into the tip forward line was more 50-50. Jason Ford won a great ball over his man and put it over the bar, but that's not generally something that Tipperary do, and they're not like Kilkenny or the Naughties, where you're going to truck ball in and expect them to win it. So Tip definitely weren't playing to their strengths. Now, as regards, I'm not saying there was any shadow box or anything like that. As regards who wanted it more in the second half, Waterford definitely wanted it more and were absolutely driving to the finish line, whereas Tip kind of limped to the finish line. But very impressive from Waterford now, in fairness, and crucially, Irla Daly coming back in at 6. He went to 6, and Austin Gleeson went to wing back. He obviously went off with a sprained ankle just before half time. Hadn't had a big impact. Had gotten forward a couple of times and looked dangerous. Just gave a couple of bad hand passes. The end product wasn't quite there, but they look like if he's going to be fit to play against Clare, that maybe they'll give him a bit more, he can freestyle a bit more on the wing, whereas in the centre you can't. And I think Eric Daly is the man for the centre, because not only is he defence minded and would sit back in front of Prunty, he's also good at getting forward when the opportunity arises. Prunty going off as well is another worry, a quad injury there. Like, he'd be huge. I'd argue, I think he'd be a bigger loss than Gleeson to be honest with you, if I'm being honest. Because who could they survive without Austin Gleeson playing at wing back or in the forwards or wherever he's going to be? Potentially, I think they could. Could they survive without Prunty at full back? I'm not so sure, because he's been an absolute rock there the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, and obviously, if you're a Waterford fan out there, let us know what your thoughts are. Austin Gleeson, is his potential loss more important than Conor Prunty's, or what way do you see it? From a Tipperary, I'll just go through a couple of other points we've made here. Brendan Cummins, he did a column this morning. He says the one fear every team will have of Tipperary in the Championship is that when the ball goes in deep inside the penalty area, the stick work of their forwards is the best in the country. Jason Ford, Jake Morris, Shamie Callan and Bubbles, when they get you one-on-one, it's a big danger, but the conundrum is getting the ball in their own 65 so they can deliver it in long. Now, a comment has come in on Facebook. As I said, get your comments in, please. Absolutely, we appreciate it. What skill level are you talking about that is superior to other teams? Explain yourself in greater detail in order for us to understand what you mean. Waterford players have as much skill as Tipperary. Well, just more so that I think that Tipperary have kind of generational type players in certain positions. Now, some of them have obviously passed on, but like Seamus Callan, probably one of the best stickmen we'll probably ever see. 36 championship goals, all from play, and there's nobody in the current generation that comes even close to that from play. Jason Ford, brilliant stickman. Bubbles O'Dwyer. But this is something that I referred to last Thursday on the preview show as well. The Tipperary have so many brilliant forwards, but it's hard to fit them all in. And when I mean brilliant forwards, I mean unbelievable stickmen, lads who will make the ball talk to you from 100 yards. But like maybe not all of them are brilliant at working the ball out the other way. But the big problem is the ball isn't going into them in the front foot. Like that ball that Deise Hutchinson got in the game made it so hard for Cathal Barrett. I felt really sorry for Cathal Barrett. Like it doesn't matter how good you are, and he's obviously brilliant, but if you put great ball in front of someone who has the Premier League soccer pace of Deise Hutchinson, like best of luck to you. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're Dahi Burke, Cathal Barrett, there's other brilliant backs that you can name there. Sean Finn as well. No, actually, Sean Finn has done very well in him, but the team setup around him makes it that bit easier.
It just shows you, Shane, it doesn't matter how good you are. If the ball going in is, if it's at that much of a disadvantage to you, it doesn't matter how you are. And we've seen Barrett in the form of his life, but like you'd have to say that guys further up the field were actually hanging him out to dry because they're allowing that quality to come in. They're allowing Waterford to play heads up, whereas the Waterford players need to be under pressure delivering ball in realistically, and they weren't under that sort of pressure yesterday. Yeah,
and when I say like Tipperary have more skillful players, I think too, like in the team there's more top quality sort of like just pure stand-up hurlers. I'm not talking about better athletes, lads who can run past you, good touch, all that. Waterford have all of that, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying if both teams play at the very, very best with the exact same game plan, we'll say I think Tipperary's hurlers would cut apart Waterford hurlers more often than the other way around. Do you think I'm right or wrong with that? Do you understand where I'm coming from? What your interpretation of that is?
No, I do understand where you're coming from. Like I do think they have. It's actually kind of hard to define it almost. But if you're putting let's say Jason Ford, the two McGraths and Bubbles, like they can literally do anything from a standing position anywhere on the pitch. They could do anything with their wrists, whereas Waterford, some of the Waterford forwards, maybe it's more high energy, maybe it's a bit more to do with athleticism, which is, don't get me wrong, that's a massive part of the modern game now. But I'm talking about, if someone hardly has room to move and they're in an area, the equivalent of a phone box, I take the tip players to get a score. I take Bubbles or Noel McGrath to get a score and find little pockets of space. Whereas Waterford, maybe it's more, it's a mixture of pace and skill, if you know what I mean. But I do understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and get your comments in if you want to disabuse me over that. But that's just.
But just on that chain as well, interestingly, something you said there, that might actually be working against Tipperary now, because they have so many of those players and they don't have that mix like Waterford have of skill and speed. So the boys have, a lot of Tip lads have speed of thought and speed of mind, but maybe not speed of foot. And that's what you need to have that in modern hurling now. So that's why I'm saying to you, week on week, I'm not sure if they can I'm not sure if they can play the two McGraths, Bubbles, and Jason Ford in the same forward line. I genuinely don't think they can in a big championship game anymore.
Yeah, and they probably won't either. It was very striking from Watford. They were able to run up the centre of Tipperary throughout this game and did so in the first half. Remember, Austin Gleeson at one stage missed time in a hand pass to Peter Hogan, who I think it was just outside him. Now, he might have taken on the scoring chance himself. Jack Prendergast, I think another time, he ran up the centre, gave it to Deise Hutchinson, who ended up taking too many steps. I don't know if you remember that particular example midway through the first half. And then Kieran Bennett, I think he was running through in the 34th minute and ended up spooning the ball over the bar. They were able to do that time and time again. And I can't remember Tipperary doing that. And I remember made a note at one stage saying, Tipperary, where's the running game? No variety to the play, no ball inside. I mean, if you put 10 balls into Seamus Callanan's hand or even Jake Morris's hand, they're going to do damage. Or, again, put the ball into Jason Ford's hand. That's when he's going to start showing his value to the team. So that's what Watford did so well. And all of this might sound that I'm sort of crowing and giving out and saying Tipperary should be better and all this. I still recognise that Watford are really, really good. And they're on the, when you look at some of how the league has gone for them, awful against Cork the first day out, conceded 5-22, fell apart against Galway in the second half, massive turnaround for the tribe there. But they've beaten Limerick, albeit a Limerick team that went down to 14 men at 10 points to 5 ahead. And now they've beaten Tipperary as well. Obviously, the West Mead win as well, they were much changed. But there's a lot of good about Watford, but there's still a couple of little issues there. Now, they've got a lot of players that are improving on from last year. Deise Hutchinson looks like he's taken that extra step, hence scoring 2-2 there. Now, if a team isn't as wide open as Tipperary were, will he score quite as much? Because it'll probably still take another year or so for his hurling to really get as sharp as it could be. You take 3 or 4 years away from playing hurling all the time, it's going to take a little bit of time for it to sharpen up. Now, that's not, I'm not talking him down at all, because I think his graph will only improve again. Stephen Bennett looks like maybe he could even take another step on from next year. You mentioned Shane Bennett. He gave Paddy Maher a very, very tough time at his pace in there as well. Peter Hogan did all right. Jack Fagan did all right. Jack Prendergast looks like he's kicking on to another level. Even the bench, Michael Kiley came on, did well. Kieran Kerwin did well. Like there's a lot of good stuff there at Watford.
There definitely is, and even there was a couple of chances that went amiss as well. Stephen Bennett had a free about 40 yards out, I'd say, at one stage, and all of a sudden you can see his brother Kieran charging through the middle. Stephen Bennett played it over the top, and Kieran actually just dropped the ball, but it was a clear goal chance as well. And just having the two Bennetts in the forward lines, and sometimes the three of them, there's almost this telepathic nature between the three of them, and rightfully so, because they've been playing out in the garden, I'm sure, and the father Pa had them out in the garden hurling since they were knee-high to a grasshopper. But there's a freestyle element to them in the forward line, and it's really, really exciting. And Shane Bennett is, as I said, with the drop puck goal he got a couple of weeks ago, and even he put a ball across the square yesterday that Jack Prendergast actually missed for a goal as well. He's almost like a bit of a throwback at times, a throwback to a hurler in the 90s. It's kind of just a swashbuckling forward who will do things that you won't expect that he'll do. He won't just take you on every time. He won't lean back every time. He'll try and deliver a pass. He'll do different things every time. And I think, they put up a big score against Galway, obviously. I think it was 3-23, put up a big score again yesterday. They just need to solidify at the back. And if they do, you'd fancy them to put up a big score against most teams. And I do think they have pushed on a small bit more, particularly up front, than last year, even on from the All-Ireland final last year. And it's amazing to think that they've got themselves in a good position, despite missing, Stephen O'Keefe and despite missing Tyg de Borca. The injuries are a worry. It's only 2 weeks. It's such a short time frame to get Prunty back, to get Gleeson back. And Liam Cahill unequivocally said that if they're not 100%, they won't play. And I think he has faith in his panel now, and he has guys that are coming in and making an impact on given days as well. So I think Waterford will be happy enough with where they are. Just really need to just sort out at the back, and I think they're getting there. I think Erla Daly is the man to plug that all-important hole at number 6.
Brian White, would you take Liam Cahill over Sheedy as tip manager if you had the option? I think Sheedy has enough credit in the bank at the moment, but I think Cahill is certainly putting himself in a very, very good position to be the next man in. And I think I've said this before. I think sometimes with Tipperary, and Liam Sheedy is very loyal to some players that have delivered him before, that sometimes with Tipperary there's an element of learning the hard way before you change things. But if it's going to happen anytime, maybe the lessons are going to be learned from this league game. But then again, like working the ball out, running off the shoulder, all that kind of stuff, I'm not sure you can just do that in the space of a couple of weeks before Championship. A couple of other points. Watford's just took over the start of the second half. I think they had 12 chances in a row before Tipperary had a chance in the second half. And Jason Ford scored a free in the 43rd minute. But outside of that, between half-time and the 50th minute, Tipperary had no attempt from play. That was absolutely ridiculous. And a point in here from Paul Kennedy on YouTube, Watford could have had 8 goals if the final pass was better at times. We're able to run through the centre at will. Tip need a bit more in speed and energy around the middle third. I actually think it's just the fact that the Tipperary are playing a little bit individualistically at the moment is the problem. They're not running off the shoulder, not support running. I think that's the problem, because then they get turned over and all of a sudden the team has kind of been pulled out in different directions, and Watford are using it and they are running at them, and then that's causing 2-on-1s all over the pitch. That's my issue.
It was an interesting one yesterday as well, Shane. Dan McCormack, who generally offers Tip a huge amount of energy, looked like he was assigned to man-mark Calum Lyons to stop Calum Lyons getting forward, and generally did that. And Lyons got his score, I think, when McCormack was off the pitch. But they robbed Tipperary of a lot of energy because, you know, it looked like he was focusing on a man-marking job there. Maybe that's for further down the line, I'm not sure. But they were definitely robbed of a lot of energy around the middle. And Michael Breen's a funny one. He definitely mixes the good with the bad. When he's good, he's brilliant. But, you know, he got an early score after 40 seconds and without having a go at him, I didn't see him for the next half an hour, and he can kind of really fleet in and out of games. Interesting as well, after we were talking about Sheedy there, Sheedy and Tommy Dunn and Eamon O'Shea were all out in the pitch for a good half hour afterwards as the Tip subs went through a fairly rigorous running session and even got in, you know, about 15 or 20 minutes of hurling as well. And it was noticeable to see that Bubbles was doing probably extra running then after with the strength and conditioning trainer, Carol on as well. So they obviously, you know, feel that he needs to get an extra bit done. And I know Sheedy said as well that they're in the middle of a training block as well. So they're 3 weeks out. Everybody is trying to jam as much in without driving players and driving the whole thing over the edge. But they want them fit for Championship. But it's not catastrophic Tip being beaten yesterday. The league was generally a positive league for them. It's so hard to. You just can't overreact to anything at the moment, because 1 week it's great and the next week it's not so good. And yeah, it's all really, as Cattle said, it's all about Championship. Waterford winning yesterday, he was saying if they're beaten by Clare in the Munster Championship, that's totally forgotten about. You know, nobody's going to remember it. So it's all placing stock on Championship. Championship is all that matters. Yeah,
it's true. Like, I mean, after the last round of the league, when everyone knew they had a week off, maybe Tipperary said, look, actually, Joe and Tipperary had to play West Mead even before that. Maybe the week before the West Mead game, or as soon as they'd played the previous game, they were like, right, in the next few weekends, we've got West Mead, we've got a weekend off, we've got Waterford, and then we've a couple of weekends off, and then we're out in Championship. Maybe just decided we're going to go and train as hard as possible, and come what may in the results in the last 2 league games, we may not even use our sort of plan A in these games. And fair enough, that means we play on Watford's terms and they win this game, they turn it around as they did. Well, look, that's just the way it turned out. Maybe they're accepting that it's not going to go brilliantly. You talked about Dan McCormack and Michael
You love
Breen.
that one, Dan Breen.
I'm not the only one who did it. Someone did it in commentary recently as well, and they were covering the game. But that's 2/3 of the half forward line, or certainly the way, you know, the 10 and 12 as they were picked. And then Noel McGrath was sent forward and he got a few scores, but you know, he was very quiet in the game as well. So Tipperary's engine room, if you like, that didn't really get going. Paddy Cadell started well, faded out of the game. He was taken off. Alan Flynn certainly didn't take over the game either. Seamus Kennedy, centre back, he didn't really massively impact the game either. So I think, you know, if you were to take this game really, really seriously, you'd be very worried about where Tipperary are going for the summer. But then the problem is, how seriously do you sort of take it? So keep getting your comments in, and we'll talk plenty more about it, because
just a quick one there. Niall O'Mara's out for 3 to 4 weeks as well. Shane, he got his appendix out last week, so he's gone. He won't feature in that Munster semi-final, and will probably, if they do well, to be back even for a Munster final at this stage, I'd say, as well, if they do get there.
Just a reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. If you want to get this Wexford jersey, that Galway jersey Michael Verney has, go to orgaretro.com and put in the promo code OurGame. You'll get 15% off. Right, the other game in Division 1A was Limerick against West Mead. Limerick did make plenty of changes for this game, but a lot of star players out there too. 326 to 18 points is how it finished, but they were only ahead by 18 points to 14 at the second half water break. At that stage, though, the Treaty took over, winning the remainder by 3-8 to 4 points. The goals came through Kyle Hayes, who raided forward, Darren O'Connell, who got a nice rebound. Pat Ryan got a goal as well in the 74th minute, and he's looking in great shape, by the way. Aaron Gallan also got 8 points, 2 of those from play. Seamus Flanagan with 4. So, I mean, a comprehensive enough victory. I don't think anyone is too shocked by that. And it rounds off what has also been a fairly tough league for Westmead, hasn't it?
It has been a tough league, to be fair. And as I said, we said in the preview show, they picked up a lot of injuries as well along the way. Killian Doyle has a hamstring, and Davy Glennon's in some doubt about whether he'd be able to play. Joe McDonough as well. I think, we were talking about big blocks of training that were done. I'd say Limerick have a fair block done at this stage. I'd say they had a nice bit done, even coming into that Westmead game there. They were always going to win, realistically, unless they were totally below par. There was a couple of interesting things even from the Limerick team. Just the fact that Declan Hannon was out and that Kyle Hayes didn't play centre back, that he played wing back, and I think maybe they're realising while Kyle Hayes might be the solution maybe long term to whenever Declan Hannon steps away, what he offers to them at wing back is huge. Like, he's not that raiding force at centre back. He can't really be. Even Tyg de Borca for Waterford, he comes so far, but he doesn't go, that far. You can't stay going. You can't be setting up goals, because if you're out of puff when the ball comes back down, you're under pressure. Your main duty is taken away. So I thought that was interesting, and it's no coincidence probably that he ended up with 1-1 yesterday as well too. As a result of that, I think they've realised probably that if he's going to be playing in defence, he's probably going to be playing halfback unless Hannon has to go off in the middle of a game. So I thought that was interesting as well. But Limerick kind of only did what they had to do. In fairness, Pat Ryan, who showed good glimpses against Cork, was good again and got in for a good goal at the end. And as you say, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because the socks are pulled up, but he looks huge. Like, he looks massive. It's the same sometimes at times with TJ with the socks pulled up as well. It does make you look an awful lot bigger.
You mentioned Kyle Hayes there, centre back. I'd say the average position, if you could, you sometimes see this with like soccer, with soccer analysis, they show you the average position of the players all over the field. I'd say that wing backs are generally 10 or 15 yards further ahead than centre backs. You like to be in a line of 3 in both lines of defence, but generally it doesn't really work out that way. It's probably like 2 and then a Roman corner back following the Roman corner forward. You want the 3 half back line, but generally it's a midfielder sitting back, centre back sits back a bit more. So you can fully understand why John Kiley would like to have that deep attacking option in Kyle Hayes. You can kind of see to some degree why Liam Cahill had Austin Gleeson operating as a midfielder who was sitting a little bit deep and had that license to burst forward. Caleb Lyons, of course, is becoming a really, really important attacking threat from deep. And I wonder, are there any other half backs out there, wing backs out there, who are in the same kind of line of things? I don't think Pádraig Mannion does that type of role. I think he more sits back and he covers his own area and probably sweeps in behind the 6 as well. Very combative, gets stuck into winning ball and around midfield. I wonder if people want to get their comments in. Do you think there's anyone else necessarily in that line of things? Maybe you'd think it's something that Davy Fitz has definitely done in the past with Wexford. Think of how often Paddy Foley would raid forward, or Sean Murphy gets forward for scores. Sometimes he'd be man marking a wing forward and he'd push him the other way. So get your comments in on that. Diarmuid Ryan for Clare, we're going to talk about Clare in a second. He got forward for 3 scores. So there are definitely more and more players who are capable of doing that. And I'd say most wing backs love doing it, don't they? I mean, yourself, like if you're playing wing back and you see the ball being played around the other side of the field, and all of a sudden 20 yards of space opens up for you around midfield, and the ball comes across you, and you've all day basically to knock it over. It's a thing of beauty.
Yeah, you don't need an invitation when there's space arises or anything like that. There's nothing better than picking up a ball when you're by yourself and just you can open up the legs or whatever. Yeah, it's kind of gone a lot in hurling now, Shane, as well. That the way say traffic is kind of all one side of the pitch, and there's a lot of bodies, and like a lot of time now, teams that are really, really smart will work the ball out as quick as you can, get away from traffic. Then all of a sudden you have a big switch on and you could have a half back in an acre of space because everybody else has been dragged to the side of the pitch where all the traffic is. So there's definitely, like it used to just be attacking wing backs in football, but definitely Kyle Hayes, Gleeson, I'd say if he was playing wing back, would try to do it yesterday at different stages as well. There was just a couple of misplaced hand passes, and as one of our viewers said there, Waterford could easily have had 8 goals. But it's trying to use the best attributes that they have. It's making sure that they're not lost, even though they are playing wing back.
Absolutely. So we'll move on to Clare's win over Kilkenny at this point. 420 to 125. Kilkenny were in a decent position in this game, and even like they were 14 points to 2-9 ahead at half time. But Clare took over in that second half. Tony Kelly, some of the goals he got. Do you ever find when you're watching Tony Kelly and he scores a beauty these days that you just laugh? He hit the top corner, like he got the ball played across him, and he smashed one into the top corner in the first half, and I just laughed because it's just so brilliant. And it's almost like predictable. If someone else does, it's a bit of a shock. With Tony Kelly, you're a bit like, of course he put it into the top corner. And then he gets the penalty, and it's kind of, you're waiting for the inevitable top corner, and it just comes. And like, Owen Murphy didn't have a chance. He's just glorious to watch. Like, when he's on form, who's better?
Yeah, it's funny, Shane. We probably take some players for granted at the moment. Like, with Tony Kelly playing the hurling of his life, and, there's obviously been a bit of negativity about Clare, and last year did no hope going into a lot of the games, and he's almost stuck his chest out and raised his game to another level at county level. Like we saw with Ballier for years, but in the last I'm not going. It's been happening for a good while, and obviously he's a previous hurler of the year. But in the last 6 or 7 months, he's taken his hurling to another level. He really has, and at the moment we have him with TJ Reid, Seamus Callan in 2019 and 16 and 14 and 15. Some of the Patrick Horgan for Cork as well. Some of the greatest forwards that have ever played the game. And there's things that Kelly does, and you just like a top corner goal from a penalty. The margins are so fine, but he just continues to do it week on week. It is an absolute joy to watch. He's just a really, really special talent, in fairness.
Yeah. Credit must go to Eibhear Quilligan for a brilliant save later on against TJ Reid. It was 420 to 125 at that stage. Obviously, that ended up being the winning score, and maybe Kilkenny could have won a quick puck out and got another score and turned the game around. But a brilliant save from him against TJ Reid, who was held scoreless from play, it must be said. And Walter Walsh went off injured in the first half. Looks like a slitter went through his face guard and rearranged his nose for him and spread it like Dairy Lee butter. And Adrian Mullen went off injured in the first half. Now, I don't believe that's too bad, but he'd come back and looked pretty good. He did a crucial last year. The question would be how he would get on this year after making his comeback. But he did pretty good, I have to say, but he had to be taken off just before half time. That would be a big concern just a few weeks out from Championship, because they're not going to have it easy in their Leinster semi-final against, people will expect that it's going to be Wexford beating Laois. I think most people would kind of agree with that. But TJ's form from play, not lighting it up every single game, as you would expect. Showed some good signs. He's 100% right. Billy Ryan was okay. He's had some games where he's been on the top of the ground, and he's brilliant against Wexford, but it hasn't happened in every single game. So Owen Cody with 4 was quite good. Martin Keown came on and got a goal. But I have to say, I wasn't blown away by Kilkenny here, and there was no surprise when they lost this game for a finish.
No, like we talked about the Waterford game or the Galway game changers, and generally, Mannion, Whelan, Canning, deliver to a fair extent every day. Kilkenny, like Billy Ryan might do it one day, maybe doesn't back it up the next day. TJ will generally obviously back it up nearly every day. That's why they need, Adrian Mullen back to himself. And in fairness, he's somewhat back to himself, having been very, very quiet the first day against Dublin. But Kilkenny just don't have enough guys that on a given day that they're going to pitch in. They have some guys that'll pitch in now and again, but it's just not, there's just that reliability is not there compared to some of the other big hitters, like the likes of Limerick, the likes of Galway, even the likes of Waterford as well. So TJ's only played 3 of their league games, which is unusual. He's generally, I'd say, over the last 4 to 5 years, played every game that he's been available for. He's probably been rested in 2 games, which is probably a sign of Brian Cody showing probably just how important he is to the cause. But like the same kind of problems at, in the cornerbacks, I would say, are raising their heads again, conceding 4 goals. David Reedy got, an absolute beauty of a goal, but he sold it down the heart of the Kilkenny defence, which is not something you see too often. So there's definitely worries there. I keep saying it. There's worries at midfield, and I think there's worries in the full backline in Kilkenny as well that don't look like they've been remedied yet, and they need to be remedied fairly quickly. Yeah,
they did have Richie Lahey come back, so that's a good positive for them, but yeah, I got to say that there's a lot of players around the pitch that are coming through, or that are probably on the team, that lads who were on the panel for a number of years and could never kind of solidify a position, who are now being turned to at this point, which, in the past, if somebody wasn't going to make the breakthrough with Cody, he kind of got rid of them and that was the end of it. But he's now having to turn to players that he maybe didn't think were his number one choice before.
He doesn't have that luxury. Sure, he doesn't have that luxury anymore.
And a couple of players coming through where you think, are they physically at the level that you want just yet? Or a couple of them probably maybe a bit slight and falling over a little bit easy, or, a little bit ungainly or gangly. You don't want to be too insulting, and that's why I'm not picking out any players in particular. But there is a bit of a feeling of that, like contrasted with the likes of Limerick and maybe even Galway. And I know Kilkenny are Leinster champions, so they're going to have to be knocked off before they're no longer a contender. But there are signs there where you think, right, for all the dying with your boots on and this sort of talk that's out there, there does seem to be, it's getting to that stage where you sort of wonder, who are they going to hang their hat on if not TJ? And if TJ is kept quiet, is there enough going on elsewhere?
It's not something that you would have ever, thought of before, but you do wonder, is there a lack of class in the forward line? Like really, really, classy players. They had 6 players that could kill you in the noughties. They probably only have one at the moment, but other guys pitching in on various days. And you just do wonder who picks up the mantle when TJ steps away. And I don't know whether it's going to be a couple of years or how long it'll be, but there's no obvious replacement. There's no obvious player that's going to. Adrian Mullen's a fine player. He's not a TJ Reid type of player. So you just wonder who's going to pick up the mantle when he kind of finishes up, and they'll really be like. We haven't talked about it too much, but how unlikely are they to win national honours when he steps away, and how unlikely are they to win national honours for quite a while when he steps away?
Yeah, it's a fair question.
I'd say you'd be happy enough.
Well, Kilkenny fans, get your comments in there, because Michael Verney has just fairly slated you there.
I've also said that I think they'll definitely get to a Leinster final this year as well, but I'm just wondering, going forward, what do Kilkenny people think? Who's going to pick up the, we all wondered, when Shefflin walked away and these guys walked away, who was going to pick up the mantle? And you would have said that Richie Hogan, obviously, who hasn't featured in the league yet, hasn't played a minute to the best of my knowledge, him and TJ were possible heirs to the throne, and at various stages they have been, particularly TJ, who's possibly brought things to another level. But you just wonder who's going to pick up the mantle when he steps away, and Richie's obviously going to be stepping away in the next year or two as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah, Clare are probably a little bit concerned about Aaron Fitzgerald with the possible rib injury. David Mcinerney played wing back, started okay, got a point almost straight away. He went off with pointing to his groin neck of the woods as well. He's a big loss too, because he hadn't been playing up until this game. Actually, they'd like to have both of those available for Waterford, but again, the condensed league, teams out, trying to rush lads back, all that kind of stuff. You don't know what Brian Lohan is dealing with, but that's of huge concern. Colin Galvin, another player that they're obviously trying to get up to game speed, but can't really remember him getting into this game at all as I watched it. Didn't get into the Dublin game last week. But actually, when you think about it, the scorelines that they've put up 2 weeks in a row against Dublin and Kilkenny, 2 seasoned Leinster teams, 420 this week, 34 points last week. They're putting up some serious scorelines. Aidan McCarthy, again, if they get the ball to him more often, he's just going to do more and more damage. And that was a problem, I thought. They didn't always deliver the ball to him, didn't always deliver the ball to Tony Kelly. probably did try and go in long a lot to Aaron Shanahan. Sometimes it stuck, sometimes it didn't. Shane O'Donnell didn't even play, so there's arguably even more scores going to come into this team. And then just back to John Conlon at centre back. Now, Brian Lohan was asked about it afterwards, and he said that it's a new position for John. You have to realise as well, he's coming back from a cruciate injury, so it was going to take him a while to get up to the pitch of playing in that position, but we're very happy with it and the whole half back line. Is it getting to the stage where John Conlon has proven a lot of people wrong, or are we going to look at the flip side and say, well, they weren't in the league group to really test it out against Cork, Tip, Galway, Limerick, and so on?
I tell you, there's an ignorance to Brian Lohan that I love, because everybody, including myself, was probably calling for Conlon to be, reinstated into the full forward line. He obviously sees something, a necessity that he's needed back there to anchor that defence. And while the first day didn't go so well against Antrim, you have to remember that was his first game in. It must have been 15 or 16 months as well. So it was bound no more than Adrian Mullen with Kilkenny, or even Colin Galvin now with Clare as well. It takes time to bed back in. It takes time to bed into a new position as well. So he's definitely been solid enough. Even his deliveries have been a lot better. And in fairness, they've persevered with it. And maybe Brian Lohan realised, everyone would say, oh, just put David Mcinerney centre back or whatever, but he obviously had a knock as well, and he could be missing the Waterford game now, having picked up a knock at the weekend as well. So maybe he looked at John Conlon as maybe a more solid option at centre back. Was it something I expected? No. Was it something I thought would work? No. Is it working now? He's definitely bedding in, and their half back line has been one of their strongest lines, in fairness, so far. Dermot Ryan moving back to wing back. He's been one of the best players in the league. I'd say if you're picking a league team of the season, I'd say he'd probably be on at wing back. And it's funny, and we've talked about this before, he's offering as much on the scoreboard as a wing back as he would as a wing forward. So they're essentially getting the best of both worlds from him as a defender, and an attacker. So he's playing super stuff too. So has the Conlon experiment worked? I'd have to say it has long term, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, from Kilkenny's point of view, would they be concerned about how easily Clare were able to run up the centre of their defence? And even at times, not necessarily getting a hurley or a hand on these players. Aidan McCarthy set up that goal well for Tony Kelly, and he was able to waltz through and smash it into the top corner as only he does. Paddy Deegan with an awkward tackle on Ian Galvin for that goal. And again, this comes back to how many half backs do Kilkenny have, and they're converting them into midfielders and the full back line. I'd say Paddy Deegan, very good player that he is, he would probably be more comfortable somewhere out in the half back line. But so it is. David Reedy was able to solo straight through for his goal. And then I think it was Ryan Taylor was able to get a flick and knock the ball over for Aaron Shanahan as well. So that's, again, just like Tipperary we talked about a while ago, like some of the big three that we've talked about, Cork, Tipperary and Kilkenny, the traditional three, if you want to call them that, they're all wobbling a little bit here, and Kilkenny no more than the others. But how much are we going to take into consideration the league? Are you that concerned by it? And by the way, SSRI with a comment here, I brought it up a second ago, we need a standalone league final, whole thing feels devalued.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Yeah, no more than the football side of things. Like it is a bit mad.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the big three, how would you describe the big three after the league? You'd probably have three big question marks behind each of them, wouldn't you? You're just
the big three question marks. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. You're just not like you're not. You just there's a lot of questions about the three of them. To be honest with you, they mixed the good with the bad. The first time it was probably really put up to Kilkenny, and they probably didn't pass the test against Clare. So, yeah, as I said, a lot of questions kind of going into it. But you have to remember as well, Kilkenny were probably impressive before the Clare game. Faded out late on against Clare, which would be a bit of a worry. Clare kind of pushed on. Kilkenny traditionally would be pushing on at the finish line, whereas Clare kind of, did a Kilkenny on it almost on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, so you're seeing Kilkenny getting to a Leinster final, that's what you said already a couple of times. Do you think
that's more to do with I just haven't seen enough from Wexford, and I'm not sure if, not that they've been found out, I'm just not sure if they have much more to bring to the table. So it's not, Kilkenny's unbelievable form that's making me kind of make that decision either.
Yeah, but do you see them winning this Leinster title? They did beat Galway last year, but like it is year number 2 for Shane O'Neill, so he's got his feet under the table now. Obviously, both of his years have been interrupted by COVID, but he's probably got a fair idea of his panel now, and he's had a longer time to develop what he's doing, and he definitely has a lot of good raw materials, as we said.
Yeah, no, I think Galway are the standout team in Leinster at the moment. I think they're right on Limerick's coattails as well. And I think after being, turned over in the last 15 minutes of the Leinster final last year, I think they'll be mad keen. They'll be mad keen to win Leinster, and potentially if Limerick are winning Munster, or the favourites to win Munster, to avoid them until the last possible moment as well.
Yeah, so we'll move on. Again, get your comments in here, and we're brought to you by OurGameRetro.com. If you want to get this Wexford jersey, that Galway jersey there, use the promo code OurGame and get 15% off.
Have I got the Jerry Mcinerney moustache as well for the jersey? I'm getting there, I'd say. I have the white boots on. Nobody can see them, but I have the white boots on here as well.
I wonder, could you just go with a man bun and maybe just go with the full-on little schmiggin mustache as well? I think people should get their comments in and let us know what you should do with that hairstyle. But as things go, that's kind of a rat's nest sitting on your head.
For Thursday's show, I'm thinking about shaving everything except the moustache just for the show.
Yeah, that'll be tasty. Yeah. Antrim beat Laois at the weekend, 223 to 122. Now we know that Cheddar Plunkett's had plenty of injury woes throughout this league season, but Conal Cunning with 9 points, he was the starter, and Owen Campbell with 1-1. Niall McKenna, another good performance. Kieran Clark as well, getting a couple of points as well. So Antrim looking really good. I think Laois fans would have been fairly frustrated with some of the wides. I think they had something like 17 wides, some of them from positions that they would be frustrated with, something like I said earlier with Tipperary too. But Antrim really are franking their form and backing it up with wins and results against different teams. Obviously, beat Clare, good performances against Dublin and Kilkenny, drew with Wexford, and now capping it off with a win over Laois. I think just to cement their improvement during the league, they probably needed to win this game.
They did, and it's the first game they've been favourites for, Shane, as well, which, they've been underdogs and plucky underdogs coming into games or whatever. They were favourites to win this game, and I think you and me both fancied them to win this game, and they did so in a decent style as well. In fairness, Laois came back near the end, but Antrim were on top nearly the whole time. And yeah, they've really franked the form, and I think they're going into that. That's one of the most intriguing games that we know is going to happen in the championship, is that Antrim-Dublin game. And I think they'll smell that as a really, really big opportunity. Would you have ever thought coming into the league that Antrim were going to get 2 wins and a draw out of 5 games? You probably wouldn't have had with the best will in the world. From a Laois point of view then, importantly, they're getting most of their best players back on the pitch now, which is big. And PJ Scully coming back in this year, hadn't been involved for a couple of years. He got a great goal on Saturday. So they're kind of finding their feet now. The biggest game they'll play this year is probably that relegation final against West Mead, which I believe has been played, is the same day as the All-Ireland semi-final. So it's a weird one that they're going to be playing championship and then we'll go back to league, which is a strange kind of a scenario. But at least they're playing championship, and then the game that they're playing in the league at the end of the championship is probably it's a championship game essentially. So that's going to be interesting for them. To stay in Division 1 is huge. To drop back to Division 2, you're just taking a step back. The quality of games you're getting are not as good. So I'm sure Cheddar would be mad to stay in Division 1. Yeah.
We'll move on to Wexford against Dublin. So 25 points for Davy Fitz's side, 118 for Dublin. And Davy Fitzgerald, he was confined to the stand for this game. Again, like we've kind of said it before, he'd probably not be overly concerned. This was his ban after the previous game where he had a small altercation with Darren Gleeson. Now, Mark Shuda went off injured for Dublin. He'd done quite well in coming back into the team against Clare last week. So that'll be quite the blow, considering he's a big physical player who can score and run at you. Remains to be seen how long he's going to be out for. Wexford didn't create any goal chances. And after drawing with Antrim, they'd probably want to put down a marker here. So I'd imagine like Davy Fitz is going to be relatively satisfied with this. And at this point, have they moved on from the Kilkenny game and the very bad look that game had?
I think so. They were comfortable enough the other day. It looked like we were set in for a really good finish. And Dublin would come at them after Donald Burke's penalty, but Dublin didn't really kick on. In fairness, Wexford kind of had them at arm's length. Lee Chin was brilliant the other day, in fairness, from play and from place balls. And Mark Fanning hit 4 long range frees as well for them, which was essentially the difference at the end. Rory O'Connor back from injury as well, which is crucial. They need to have everybody for Wexford to be getting to a Leinster final there. I just saw that comment flash up saying that Wexford have have better hurlers than Kilkenny. Still better side than Kilkenny. When it comes to the Leinster semi-final, David will have us right. It's the game he's been targeting since the draw was made. Fair enough. I'm sure it's the game that Brian Cody's been targeting since the draw was made as well, to be honest with you. And if Davy is targeting the Kilkenny game, then I'd be surprised if he was targeting the Kilkenny game, given that they have to play a game beforehand. But I'm not sure if you put it down on paper that Wexford have better hurlers than Kilkenny either, to be honest with you. We could maybe look through that before they play in that Leinster semi-final. But I'm just not sure. I just haven't seen enough from Wexford so far. And in the years that they've gone well in Championship, they've been flying it in league. And they've kind of just been tipping along at the moment. So if it was a Wexford person, I'd be a slight bit worried going into the Championship.
As I would be with Dublin, if we're honest.
Definitely.
From a tally of 118, 1-9 of that came from place balls from Donald Burke, who's been really good. Now, he just got a point from play here. Oisin O'Rourke also got a point from a free. So that's 110 of 118 coming from place balls. Liam Rush moved up into the forward line. Difficult to know whether he's going to stay in the backs or the forward line. He had done okay in the earlier part of the league, then suffered injury. Now he's coming back into the team as well. I think, look, we talked about how Dublin probably don't have as many top-class options as you'd like to have. So they are kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, moving Chris Crummy up the field, and then he was kind of playing as named at 11 and sweep Iron, just kind of screening in front of his half-back line the last day. I presume he was doing the same job here. Haven't had a chance to watch through the entirety of that game just yet. But that, and he was brought off actually early enough in the game, brought off at half time. So I'm not sure if that was injury or if it was just a tactical change as well. But because Matty's having to move stuff around to try and find the right formula, there's always this worry. And you see this with every team. So it's a real challenge. But as you try to move players around, and like even John Kiley, like we talked about earlier in the league, was he moving around Keane Lynch and different, Kyle Hayes and different players, and were they actually playing themselves out of form because they couldn't get settled and get into a rhythm in the right spot? Is that happening a little bit with Dublin too? I mean, he is playing with a shyer hand than some other teams, so you have to take that into effect too. You
generally try and play your best players in their best positions, and if that means that you have a totally stacked backline, then in many ways, so be it. At least they've got a really strong backline.
But you can understand why he do it. I mean,
I do understand it as well. Yeah, I just not. And they've like Will Rush remain centre back now. Crummy looks like he's a fully fledged forward now at this stage. But they have a fair few. I wonder what they've learned from the league as well. If you're thinking at the end of the league, you want to have a fair idea of your starting 15. If you're unsure of your number 6 and he's moving up to the forward line, then I don't know if you have that. So yeah, they have slipped back. Dublin have slipped back, and they're looking distinctly ordinary at the moment. Whereas a couple of years ago they could beat a top ranked team on a given day. I'm not so sure if they can do that at the moment.
Yeah, it just isn't looking 100% like they can put up the score lines required. Remains to be seen. And again, like as we just said with Kilkenny, Tip, Limerick at different parts of the league or whatever, you just don't know what they're going to produce come Championship. But I think I'm very interested to see if it did prove to be shadow boxing that we saw from Wexford during the league. That what we saw in Nolan Park, where they were 14 points behind, lost by 10 eventually. That was all just a pup being sold to us by Davy because he was just targeting, even Martin Furlong with the comment there that he expects Davy to have them right. Because have we seen yet Lee Chin, Rory O'Connor, Dee O'Keefe, Conor MacDonald, all those players on top form on the one day? And if they do, is there any reason why they can't beat Kilkenny in that Leinster semi-final?
We haven't really, but I'd much rather take, say, the Galway position where they have a lot of their top ranked players playing, consistently well. I take that every day of the week rather than, we'll click on the day. I just take it that they have it in the bank that lads have played really well already this year. At different stages, Kilkenny have played pretty well throughout the league. I would take that. I take that in greater authority than, we're going to improve or we're going to come along, because the time frame between league and Championship, Wexford are playing in 2 weeks' time, so they have to turn it on and then they're going to be playing a week after that if they win, so they're going to have to turn it on very, very quickly.
What do you make of Davy trying 3 different goalies during the league?
It's an interesting one, isn't it?
For 5 games.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. I'm not too sure what you're going to learn by bringing, James Lawler in for a game and playing Seamus Dwyer in goals as well. And he's obviously, it looks like he's sticking with Mark Fanning, who has been tried and twisted over the last couple of years. Don't know whether Mark Fanning will be getting some oral assistance from somebody behind the goals or anything like that this year. But it's an interesting one, and I think even those rumors are around about whether there was communication coming into him for his puck outs and things like that. I'm not too sure if that shows a massive confidence in him. That's just my own opinion on it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Joe Butler on Facebook says, "Guys, you're being disrespectful to Laois."
I don't really think we have been, to be honest with you. We're beaten in all 5 games of the league. Beaten reasonably comprehensively by Antrim the other day. Like, you can only go on what we've seen.
Yeah, I think so. And if anyone thinks otherwise or agrees with Joe, let us know what you think. Looking at the Division 2A, was round 5 at the weekend, much like it was in all the other tiers of the league. Down beat Mead 423 to 14 points. Hefty win there. Carlow had a similar win over Kerry, 325 to 14. And I think that's sort of a marker that Tom Mullally would like to put down. And Offaly, continued, having won every game by an average of 17 points going into this, scored 132 to Wicklow's 10. So that's a 25-point win. It couldn't be more comprehensive from Offaly in this league.
Yeah, no, in fairness, and those 3 games, those 3 wins are unbelievably comprehensive. Down only coming up from 2B, they got 3 big wins, put up 423 against, a Mead side who've been up in 2A for the last couple of years. Carlow beating Kerry. I know there's a few injuries in Kerry, and those sides are going to meet in the Joe McDonagh, but that's a fair statement.
That's 20 points.
That's Kerry. Kerry were beaten by similar margin by Offaly as well. So they've taken 2 fair shellackings throughout the course of the league. Marty Kavanagh hit 114, John Michael Nolan 1-3. You'd imagine that they probably feel that they're coming right at this stage. They probably would have, they'd love to have the down game back, I'd say, because that took away any chance of promotion for them. And in fairness, the Offaly game against Wicklow, with due respect, two counties I played for both counties, but Wicklow were going very, very poor, like very, very poor. That was a much changed Offaly team, missing a load of frontline players, and like Shane Dooley hit 17 points. That's 7 more than what Wicklow hit combined. And I think it was, to the best of my knowledge, I think it was 16-0 at one stage, 118 to 2 points lead at half time. So in fairness, from my own point of view, Offaly absolutely flying, Wicklow going very poor. A lot of teams, there's such a stark difference. Wicklow are going as poor as they've gone in a couple of years. Offaly are absolutely flying. Carlow are back flying again, and Down probably have exceeded all expectations in 2A. It's great to see Offaly back. Ben Keneally got presented with the trophy yesterday in Baltic Glass by Larry McCarthy, and back Division 1 for next year. It's great to have that to look forward to.
Can I ask you, how you mentioned Shane Dooley scoring and putting up a big tally there? How's he been playing in this league? Is he going to start when they're, is he starting every game? I know you haven't seen every match yourself.
He came in against Mead, and he came in against the last day against Down. I wouldn't think so, Shane. I wouldn't think he'd be starting. Shane is obviously similar age to myself, and is probably coming to the end of his days with Offaly. Offaly are probably going for more of a pacey kind of approach, a younger kind of approach, and a real kind of running game. I would imagine. In the ring, maybe he will start a couple of games, but I'd imagine he'd be more of an impact man and can come in when games have opened up a bit. That's just my own thoughts on it. I'm sure when he hears that, he'd be only delighted to prove me wrong and nail down a starting position.
Absolutely, you're right. So Division 2B then, Derry beat Roscommon 126 to 14 points. Another hefty win as we go down the tiers. Kildare made it 5 wins from 5 with 224 to 119 win over Keith Higgins Mayo. And then just to finish up then, Division 3A, Monaghan had a very good win over Longford 120 to 313, and Sligo saw off Tyrone 118 to 13 points. So any final thoughts then just before we finish up?
No, another big score from Kildare, in fairness to them. And they've powered up to 2A, and given that they're playing a division ahead of Offaly in Championship hurling, they needed to be up in 2A. And in fairness, like, they have a real good range of scorers. Like, Jack Sheridan hit 9 points yesterday, Freeze. David Slattery got 1, 2. James Burke hit 5. I think Johnny Byrne got 2 points as well. We've gone through, like, they've got 7 or 8, like, really, really, classy players. So I'd say they're exactly where they wanted to be at the end of the league. And they'll fancy their chances of causing an upset or two in the Joe McDonagh, I'd say. And, like, it's funny, they're coming up against the downside that they beat in the Ring Cup final last year, a downside who, swatted aside a couple of teams that they're going to be playing in the McDonagh as well. So, as it always is, that Joe McDonagh Cup is going to be really, really interesting. On a given day, I'd say anybody could beat anybody.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's it for the Hurling Show. If you want to get this on audio podcast, go to patreon.com/OurGame. And a reminder that we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. If you want to get one of these cool retro jerseys, Wexford, Galway, whatever your county is, go to orgaretro.com, put in the promo code OurGame. Thanks very much, Michael.
Cheers, Shane. We'll have the championship haircut ready, I'd say, by the time the summer rolls around.
I think and hope so. Right, good luck.
Good luck.